Hello, it's Swami Pranava, and it's a beautiful rainy day in Dalat. You can hear the thunder. A wonderful time to continue with our story of Haruki Murakami, what I talk about when I talk about running. In this part of the story, he's talking about a race, his last marathon that he ran in Japan, and it was not pleasant. Other runners kept passing me, but I limped on, grimacing in pain. The numbers on my digital watch kept mercilessly ticking away. Wind blew in from the ocean, and the sweat on my shirt got cold and felt freezing. This was a winter race, after all. You'd better believe it's cold hobbling down a road with the wind whipping by while you're dressed only in a tank top and shorts. Hear the thunder? Your body warms up considerably as you run, and you don't feel the cold. I was shocked by how cold it was once I stopped running. But what I felt much more than the cold was wounded pride, and how pitiful I looked tottering down a marathon course. About a mile from the finish line, my cramps finally let up, and I was able to run again. I slowly jogged for a while until I got back in form, and then sped down the home stretch as hard as I could. My time, though, was indeed awful, as predicted. There are 3 reasons I failed. Not enough training, and not enough training. That's it in a word. Not enough overall exercise, plus not getting my weight down. Without knowing it, I'd developed a sort of arrogant attitude, convinced that just a fair to middling amount of training was enough for me to do a good job. It's pretty thin, the wall separating healthy confidence and unhealthy pride. When I was young, maybe just a fair to middling amount of training would have been enough for me to run a marathon. Without driving myself too hard in training, I could have banked on the strength I'd already built up to see me through and run a good time. Sadly, though, I'm no longer young. I'm getting to the age where you really do get only what you pay for. As I ran this race, I felt I never, ever wanted to go through that again. Freeze my butt off and feel miserable? I'll pass. Right then and there, I decided that before my next marathon, I was going to go back to the basics, start from scratch, and do the very best I could. Train meticulously and rediscover what I was physically capable of. Train meticulously and rediscover what I was physically capable of. Tighten up all the loose screws one by one. Do all that and see what happens. These were my thoughts as I dragged my cramped legs through the freezing wind, one runner after another passing me by. As I've said, I'm not a very competitive type of person. To a certain extent, I figured, it's sometimes hard to avoid losing. Nobody's going to win all the time. Nobody's going to win all the time. On the highway of life, you can't always be in the fast lane. Still, I certainly don't want to keep making the same mistakes over and over. Best to learn from my mistakes and put that lesson into practice the next time around, while I still have the ability to do that. This may be the reason why, while I'm training for my next marathon, the New York City Marathon, I'm also riding this. Bit by bit, I'm remembering things that took place when I was a beginning runner more than 20 years ago. Retracing my memories, rereading the simple journal I kept. I'm never able to keep a regular diary for very long, but I faithfully kept up my runner's journal, and reworking them into essay form helps me consider the path I've taken and rediscover the feelings I had back then. I do this to both admonish and encourage myself. It's also intended as a wake-up call for the motivation that somewhere along the line went dormant. I'm writing, in other words, to put my thoughts in some kind of order. And in hindsight, in the final analysis, it's always in hindsight, this may very well end up a kind of memoir that centers on the act of running. This doesn't mean that what's occupying me at this moment is writing a personal history. I'm much more concerned with the practical question of how I can finish the New York City Marathon 2 months from now with a halfway decent time. The main task before me right now is how I can train in order to accomplish that. On August 25th, the US magazine Runner's World came to do a photo shoot on me. A young cameraman named Greg flew in from California and spent the day photographing me. An enthusiastic guy, he'd brought a truckload of equipment by plane all the way to Kauai. The magazine had interviewed me earlier, and the photos were to accompany the interview. There apparently aren't too many novelists who run marathons. There are some, of course, but not many. And the magazine was interested in my life as a, quote, running novelist, end quote. Runner's World is a very popular magazine among American runners, so I imagine a lot of runners will say hi to me when I'm in New York. This made me even more tense, thinking how I'd better not do a lousy job in the marathon.